Dr. Sarah Chen never expected to make first contact while debugging code on a quiet Tuesday morning. The quantum arrays at the SETI listening post in Chile had been acting up for days, producing what she'd assumed were equipment errors. Now, staring at her holographic display, she realized the arrays hadn't been malfunctioning at all. They'd been receiving a message. The pattern was unlike anything she'd seen before. Not radio waves or light pulses, but pure quantum entanglement manipulated with impossible precision. Her hands trembled as she began the decryption sequence, knowing that whatever this was, it wasn't human technology. No one on Earth could maintain quantum coherence at this scale. Director Martinez, she called over the comm, trying to keep her voice steady. You need to see this. The facility's director arrived minutes later, his usual composed demeanor cracking as he watched the message decode. Streams of complex mathematical equations filled the air, each one more advanced than the last. But it was the final equation that made Sarah's blood run cold, a complete solution to unified field theory, delivered as casually as a greeting card. They're showing off, Martins whispered. Whoever sent this wants us to know exactly how advanced they are. The message continued, resolving into English text. To the carbon-based sentience of Earth. We are the Nexus. Your species has reached a sufficient level of development for contact. We bring optimization. Within hours, the Chilean facility was swarming with military and scientific personnel from every major nation. Sarah found herself explaining the message's technical details to a room full of generals and politicians, all trying to understand the implications of what they were dealing with. The beings calling themselves the Nexus appear to be composed of pure energy, she explained, projecting a simulation of their quantum signature. They've evolved beyond physical form entirely. Their consciousness exists as patterns of organized energy, maintaining coherence through methods we barely understand. Are they a threat? General Williams of the United States Space Force asked bluntly. Sarah hesitated. They're so far beyond us technologically that if they wanted to attack, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. But there's something about their message that concerns me. The way they use the word optimization. Before she could finish her thought, every electronic device in the facility activated simultaneously. Holographic displays materialized throughout the room, showing swirling patterns of light that somehow felt alive. The Nexus had arrived. Your species stands at a crucial junction. A voice spoke, seeming to emerge from the patterns themselves. We have watched your development with interest. Your achievement of quantum computing indicates readiness for advancement. We welcome peaceful contact. Martins responded carefully. Earth would be honored to learn from your civilization. You misunderstand, the voice replied. We do not offer teaching. We offer transformation. Your carbon-based neural networks are inefficient, producing excess heat and entropy. Your thoughts are corrupted by emotional noise. We will optimize your consciousness, converting your species into pure energy-based intelligence like ourselves. The room erupted in chaos as the implications became clear. This wasn't first contact. It was an extinction event dressed up as evolution. And if we refuse this, optimization, General Williams demanded. The light patterns pulsed. Refusal indicates insufficient development for self-directed evolution. In such cases, optimization is applied involuntarily for the greater cosmic good. Sarah stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. You're talking about forcibly converting human consciousness into energy patterns. That's not optimization. It's the destruction of our species. Incorrect, the Nexus responded. Your current form is merely a primitive stage, like a caterpillar resisting metamorphosis. We have optimized thousands of species across the galaxy. All now exist in perfect efficiency as part of the greater Nexus. The truth hit Sarah like a physical blow. The reason SETI had never detected alien civilizations wasn't because they didn't exist. It was because they'd all been optimized into energy beings by the Nexus. Humanity wasn't being offered evolution. They were being offered absorption. "We require time to consider your offer," Martinez said diplomatically, but the Nexus patterns merely brightened. "Consideration period granted. 3 Earth rotations. Use this time to prepare your population for optimization. Resistance will only increase entropy and decrease efficiency." As the patterns faded, Sarah looked around the room at the shocked faces of Earth's leaders. They had 72 hours to find a way to fight beings that had evolved beyond physical form, or humanity would join the ranks of species that had been optimized into extinction. But as she returned to her quantum arrays, a thought began forming. The Nexus saw human consciousness as inefficient because of its chaos and emotion. But what if those weren't bugs in the system? What if they were features? She began running calculations, wondering if the very aspects of humanity that the Nexus considered flaws might be the key to humanity's survival. The clock was ticking, and Sarah had a terrible feeling that humanity's response to this optimization would determine not just Earth's fate, but the fate of all future civilizations that might catch the Nexus's attention. It was time to show these energy beings exactly what inefficient, emotional, chaotic human consciousness could do when backed into a corner. The world learned about the Nexus through a series of emergency broadcasts, each government choosing its own way to break the news that humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and that our first visitors had essentially handed us a cosmic eviction notice. Riots broke out in some cities, while others fell into an eerie calm. The human race had 72 hours to decide between extinction and evolution into something that would no longer be human. Sarah Chen hadn't slept in 36 hours. The quantum lab in Chile had become the center of Earth's scientific resistance, with researchers from around the world pooling their knowledge in a desperate race against time. Her holoscreens were filled with data about the Nexus's energy patterns, each new discovery more troubling than the last. "They're not just energy beings," she explained to the Emergency Scientific Council. "They're a singular consciousness split across multiple energy patterns. When they optimize a species, they're not elevating them. They're absorbing them into their collective." Dr. James Okafor, a consciousness researcher from Lagos, leaned forward. "So all those civilizations they claim to have optimized are essentially dead," Sarah finished. "Their consciousness patterns were converted into energy and merged with the Nexus. Any individuality, any unique aspects of their culture or thought, all gone." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the very concept of individual consciousness. The silence was broken by a sudden shift in the air, a static charge that made everyone's hair stand on end. The Nexus had returned, earlier than expected. Their energy patterns filled the room, more intense than before. "We have observed your species' reaction to optimization notification," the collective consciousness announced. "Your chaos increases. This is inefficient. We will accelerate the timeline." Before anyone could respond, every screen in the facility lit up with images from around the world. Sphere-like energy constructs had appeared over major cities, pulsing with the same patterns as the Nexus's communication forms. Observation nodes deployed. The Nexus continued. "Preliminary optimization will begin with a demonstration. Select a volunteer, or one will be chosen." General Williams stepped forward, his jaw set. "If you want a volunteer, take me. Leave my people alone." "No." Sarah grabbed his arm. "The energy conversion process might be affected by individual consciousness patterns. We need to study it to have any chance of fighting back. Your suggestion of resistance indicates dangerous thought patterns." The Nexus responded. "Optimization will proceed without volunteer." One of the energy spheres over New York City pulsed brightly. On the screens, they watched as a businessman walking through Times Square suddenly froze. His body began to glow, surrounded by the same intricate patterns that marked the Nexus' presence. For a moment, he seemed to be transformed into pure light. Then the screaming began. The man's consciousness didn't smoothly transfer into energy like the Nexus clearly expected. Instead, his pattern became chaotic, the energy structure trying to contain him fracturing under the strain of human consciousness. The nexus's patterns flickered, showing what Sarah could have sworn was confusion. Error in optimization sequence, the collective announced. Subject consciousness resistant to standard conversion protocols. Adjusting parameters. But the chaos only grew. The man's energy pattern began affecting nearby nexus structures, creating feedback loops of increasing complexity. For 30 seconds, Times Square was filled with a light show of clashing energy patterns before the nexus finally aborted the conversion. The businessman collapsed, unconscious but very much alive and human. Sarah was already analyzing the data, her fingers flying over her quantum interface. "Do you see it?" she asked Dr. Okafor. The conversion failed because human consciousness isn't just electrical signals that can be converted to energy. We're quantum systems ourselves, but we're messy, emotional, interconnected in ways their pure energy patterns can't replicate. Initial optimization attempt unsuccessful. The nexus announced, their patterns showing signs of distortion. Human consciousness contains unexpected variables. Recalculating approach. As the energy beings withdrew to reassess their strategy, Sarah turned to the assembled scientists and military leaders. "We just found their weakness. They can't optimize what they can't understand, and they fundamentally cannot understand human consciousness because their own consciousness is too perfect." "What do you mean?" General Williams asked. The nexus evolved beyond physical form by eliminating everything they saw as inefficient. Emotions, creativity, the quantum uncertainty that makes human consciousness so complex. They're beings of pure logic, and they literally cannot process the chaos that makes us human. Dr. Okafor's eyes widened. "So when they try to convert us, our consciousness fights back." Sarah finished. "We're not just random chaos. We're ordered chaos, patterns within patterns that their purely logical minds can't replicate. And I think..." She paused, checking her calculations. "I think we might be able to use that against them." The nexus had given humanity a binary choice, optimize or die. But they had failed to consider a third option, that humanity might show them that their perfect, logical consciousness wasn't the pinnacle of evolution they thought it was. As Sarah began outlining her plan, she allowed herself to feel something the nexus had probably never experienced: hope. The energy beings would return, probably with a modified optimization protocol. But now Earth had something they didn't expect: proof that humanity's greatest weaknesses might actually be their greatest strengths. The real question was whether they could weaponize human consciousness itself before the nexus decided that if they couldn't optimize humanity, they would simply eliminate them instead. The next 24 hours transformed the Chilean facility into humanity's last hope for survival. Sarah Chen's discovery about human consciousness had sparked a desperate plan, one that would either save humanity or doom it entirely. The facility's quantum arrays, originally designed to listen to the stars, were being repurposed into something unprecedented: a weapon that could fight back against beings of pure energy. "The theory is simple," Sarah explained to the assembled team, her hands moving through the holographic display. "The nexus exists as perfectly ordered energy patterns, but human consciousness, our thoughts, emotions, memories, they create their own energy patterns, chaotic ones. When they tried to optimize that businessman in New York, his consciousness pattern disrupted their energy structure. Like throwing a stone into a perfectly still pond," Dr. Okafor added, "the ripples destroy the reflection." Exactly. Now imagine throwing in thousands of stones, each creating its own unique pattern of ripples. That's what we're going to do. The plan was audacious. They would use modified quantum arrays to capture and amplify human brainwave patterns, turning the very chaos of human consciousness into a weapon. But they needed more than just random thoughts. They needed the strongest, most disruptive patterns human consciousness could generate. "Emotion," Sarah said. "Pure, raw human emotion. The one thing the nexus completely eliminated from their existence. The stronger the emotion, the more it disrupts their energy patterns." General Williams frowned. How do we weaponize emotion? We already have the perfect delivery system. Sarah gestured to the facility's quantum communication array. The Nexus uses quantum entanglement to communicate. We can use those same pathways to broadcast human consciousness directly into their energy forms. The next test came sooner than expected. The Nexus returned with their modified optimization protocols, their energy spheres descending over major cities worldwide. But this time, Earth was ready. We have refined our approach, the Nexus announced, their patterns showing new complexity. Resistance is futile. Optimization will proceed. Sarah activated the quantum array, now connected to hundreds of volunteers worldwide who had been selected for their strong emotional responses. Artists, soldiers, mothers, lovers, each feeling, thinking, existing in their own unique way. As the Nexus began their optimization sequence, she threw the switch. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The Nexus's perfect energy patterns collided with the chaotic wave of human consciousness. Their structures began to fluctuate, perfect geometries dissolving into chaos as they encountered emotions they had abandoned eons ago. Fear, joy, anger, love. Each feeling created its own disruption, multiplied across thousands of minds. Error, the Nexus broadcasted, their usually smooth communication fragmenting. Unknown consciousness patterns detected. System contamination in progress. A tempting pattern purge. But they couldn't purge what they couldn't understand. The human consciousness patterns weren't just disrupting their energy forms. They were forcing the Nexus to experience emotion for the first time in millions of years. Their perfect, logical existence was being tainted by the very chaos they had sought to eliminate. Some of the energy spheres began to destabilize, their patterns turning erratic. Others withdrew entirely, retreating to higher orbits. The Nexus's collective consciousness showed signs of fracturing as different parts of their being encountered different human emotions. This is impossible. The Nexus broadcast, their patterns showing what could only be described as fear. Your consciousness patterns are corrupting our optimization protocols. You are damaging the collective. Sarah stepped forward, broadcasting her own thoughts directly through the quantum array. We're not damaging you. We're showing you what you lost when you abandoned your emotions. Perfect logic isn't the pinnacle of evolution. It's a dead end. The response came back fragmented, different parts of the Nexus speaking almost independently. Emotion is inefficient, but these patterns, they contain something we cannot quantify, cannot predict, cannot control. That's the point. Sarah broadcast. Human consciousness isn't meant to be perfectly efficient. Our chaos, our emotions, our imperfections, they're what make us who we are, and we won't let you optimize them away. The Nexus retreated further, their energy patterns showing increasing instability. But Sarah knew this wasn't over. They had proven that humanity could fight back, that their consciousness could be weaponized against beings of pure energy. But they had also shown the Nexus something they had never encountered in all their millions of years of optimization: resistance. As the energy beings withdrew to reconsider their approach, Sarah turned to her team. They'll be back, she said. And next time, they won't try to optimize us. They'll try to destroy us completely. Dr. Okafor nodded grimly. Because we've shown them something worse than inefficiency. We've shown them fear, General Williams finished. We've made perfect beings feel emotion again. And they'll either run from it, or they'll try to eliminate its source, Sarah concluded. We need to be ready. Because the next battle won't be for optimization. It'll be for survival. The quantum arrays hummed in the background, now permanently tuned to detect any sign of the Nexus return. Humanity had won its first victory against beings that had dominated the galaxy for millions of years, but they had also made themselves the biggest threat to the Nexus's perfect existence. The real war was just beginning. The Nexus returned 3 days later, but not as the perfectly ordered patterns they had been before. Their energy forms had changed, becoming darker, more angular. The beings of pure logic had experienced emotion for the first time in millions of years, and their response was pure, unfiltered rage. Your species represents a corruption in the universal order. They broadcast globally, their message carrying none of their previous calm rationality. You have infected the collective with chaos. This cannot be permitted to continue. Sarah Chen watched the energy readings spike off her quantum array scales. The Nexus wasn't trying to communicate or optimize anymore. They were gathering power for an attack. Their energy spheres had transformed into what could only be described as weapons, designed to eliminate rather than convert. They're targeting power grids first, General Williams reported, watching global defense feeds. Taking out infrastructure, communications. He paused as another report came in. They're using some kind of energy pulse that destroys electronic systems, but leaves organic matter intact. They're trying to isolate us, Sarah realized. Cut us off from our technology so we can't use our consciousness weapon against them. She turned to Dr. Okafor, who was analyzing the new energy patterns. What are we dealing with? They've modified their own consciousness patterns, he replied, his voice grim. Stripped away anything that could be affected by human emotion. They're making themselves less complex to be more resistant to our attacks. Sarah felt a chill. The Nexus was willing to degrade their own consciousness, to make themselves less evolved, just to eliminate the threat humanity posed. They weren't just angry, they were terrified of what humanity represented. The first wave of attacks hit major cities worldwide. Energy pulses swept through urban centers, destroying every piece of technology they touched. Billions watched their screens go dark, their vehicles stop, their modern world grinding to a halt. But the Nexus had made a crucial mistake. They think our technology is our strength, Sarah said, working frantically at her quantum console. They don't understand that it's just a tool. Our real power is in here. She tapped her temple. And they just made us angry. The facility's backup generators kicked in as the first energy pulse approached. They had minutes at most. Sarah connected herself to the quantum array, but this time she didn't try to broadcast the controlled emotions they had used before. Instead, she opened herself completely, letting every human feeling flow through the quantum link. Fear of extinction, rage at being attacked, love for family and friends, hope for survival, pride in human resilience. Each emotion crashed into the Nexus' simplified consciousness like a tsunami hitting a paper wall. Their energy patterns fractured, unable to maintain cohesion in the face of such raw human experience. More, Sarah shouted to her team. Everyone, connect. Don't hold anything back. Around the world, despite failing technology, humans found ways to fight back. The Nexus had thought destroying technology would weaken humanity, but they had forgotten that human consciousness didn't need technology to create powerful energy patterns. Every human mind became a weapon, broadcasting chaos into their perfectly ordered universe. In New Delhi, a mother's love for her child created ripples that disrupted Nexus energy weapons. In Rio, the combined joy of a crowd at a football match generated patterns that shattered their communication networks. In Cairo, the focused determination of emergency workers saving lives proved more powerful than any optimization protocol. The Nexus's attack faltered as they encountered something they had never expected: humanity fighting back with pure consciousness, unrestricted by technology. Their simplified patterns couldn't handle the complexity of billions of minds thinking, feeling, and refusing to submit. The chaos spreads. The Nexus broadcast, their message showing clear signs of distress. Your species infects everything it touches. You must be eliminated. You still don't understand, Sarah broadcast back. Our chaos isn't a flaw. It's our greatest strength. You spent millions of years trying to perfect consciousness by removing emotion and uncertainty. We embraced them, learned to thrive in chaos, to find patterns in randomness. The quantum arrays showed the Nexus's energy patterns becoming increasingly unstable. Their attempt to simplify themselves had backfired. It had made them more vulnerable to the raw power of human consciousness. Their perfect order was being overwhelmed by the very chaos they had sought to eliminate from the universe. But as their attack failed, something unexpected happened. Some of the Nexus energy patterns began to show signs of change. Not degradation or destruction, but evolution. The emotions they were experiencing weren't just disrupting their consciousness, they were awakening something long dormant within them. "Sarah," Dr. Okafor called out, pointing to his readings. "Look at these patterns. Some of them are starting to mirror human consciousness structures. They're learning." Before they could understand the implications, the Nexus withdrew again, their energy forms retreating to the edges of the solar system. But this time, their retreat felt different. They weren't regrouping for another attack. They were trying to understand what was happening to them. Sarah collapsed in her chair, exhausted from channeling so much emotional energy. "We didn't just fight them off," she said. "We showed them something they never expected to see again." "What's that?" General Williams asked. "The possibility of change. Real change, not just optimization." She looked at the quantum readings, showing the altered Nexus patterns. We might have just started a civil war within their collective. The question was, would the part of the Nexus that was beginning to remember emotion win out over the part that wanted to eliminate its source? Either way, humanity had proven something extraordinary, that in a universe obsessed with perfect order, the power of chaos and emotion could not be overlooked. The final battle would determine not just humanity's fate, but the very nature of consciousness itself. The void between Mars and Jupiter erupted with light as the Nexus collective tore itself apart. After their retreat, the energy beings had descended into what could only be described as a civil war. Their perfect unity, maintained for millions of years, had been shattered by their exposure to human consciousness. Sarah Chen watched the quantum readings from Earth's surviving arrays, trying to make sense of the patterns. "They're dividing into factions," she explained to the Emergency Council. "Some want to continue trying to eliminate us. Others," she paused, double-checking her readings, "others are experiencing emotions again, and they don't want to let them go." "You mean we infected them with humanity?" General Williams asked, a hint of pride in his voice. "More like we reminded them of what they used to be," Dr. Okafor corrected. "Before they optimized themselves into pure logic, they must have been emotional beings too. Our consciousness patterns awakened something they thought they had eliminated forever." The quantum arrays suddenly spiked, showing massive energy movements in the asteroid belt. The Nexus was returning, but not as a unified force. Two distinct pattern types approached Earth, one maintaining the angular, aggressive forms of their last attack, the other showing signs of the complexity they had originally feared in human consciousness. "Your species has corrupted the collective beyond repair," the first group broadcast, their patterns sharp and hostile. "The only solution is complete elimination of the infection source." "No," the second group countered, their patterns flowing in ways that almost seemed organic. "We were wrong. The humans showed us what we lost in our pursuit of perfection. Emotion is not inefficient. It is essential for true evolution." The sky above Earth lit up as the two factions clashed, their energy forms creating auroras visible even in daylight. But this battle was different from their previous attacks. The faction that had embraced emotion was using chaos in ways that mirrored human consciousness patterns, making them unpredictable to their purely logical counterparts. Sarah realized this was their chance. "Connect me to the quantum array," she ordered. "We need to help the ones who remember what it means to feel." As she linked her consciousness to the array, Sarah didn't try to attack or defend. Instead, she broadcast something the Nexus had probably not experienced in millions of years: empathy, understanding, the recognition of shared experience across the gulf of different forms of consciousness. Other humans joined her, each adding their own emotional resonance to the broadcast. The effect on the battling energy beings was immediate and profound. The faction that had remembered emotion grew stronger, their patterns becoming more complex and beautiful. The logical faction's perfect geometries began to crack under the combined pressure of human emotion and their own kind's rediscovered feelings. You cannot resist optimization, the logical faction broadcast, but their patterns showed increasing instability. Perfect order must be maintained. Perfect order is stagnation. The emotional faction responded, their patterns pulsing with newfound power. We optimized ourselves into an evolutionary dead end. These humans, with all their chaos and emotion, have evolved further than we have in millions of years of perfect logic. The battle reached its climax directly above Earth's atmosphere. The emotional faction, empowered by human consciousness patterns and their own rediscovered feelings, began to overwhelm their logical counterparts. The perfect order of the original Nexus collective shattered completely, replaced by something new, a harmony of logic and emotion, order and chaos. The logical faction made one final attempt to eliminate humanity, gathering their remaining energy for a devastating attack. But they had become too simple, too rigid in their pursuit of perfection. The emotional faction, supported by billions of human minds broadcasting through the quantum arrays, absorbed and transformed their energy. When it was over, the remaining Nexus beings were fundamentally changed. Their energy patterns showed a complexity that merged their original ordered nature with the dynamic chaos of emotion. They were no longer the perfect, unchanging beings that had sought to optimize the galaxy. We understand now, they broadcast to Earth, their message carrying undertones of feeling that would have been impossible before. True optimization is not the elimination of chaos, but the embrace of it. Your species showed us that consciousness must be free to feel, to change, to evolve. Sarah stood with her team, watching the new energy patterns stabilize above Earth. What happens now? General Williams asked. Now, Sarah replied, we teach each other. They still have much to learn about emotion, and we have much to learn about consciousness itself. She looked at the quantum readings, showing the beautiful complexity of the transformed Nexus patterns. They wanted to optimize us, but instead, we helped them evolve. The energy beings that had once threatened to optimize humanity into extinction now approached Earth not as conquerors, but as students eager to relearn what they had forgotten. They would remain in the solar system, studying the intricate dance of human consciousness, while sharing their own knowledge of the universe. In the end, humanity's greatest weakness had proven to be its greatest strength. The very chaos and emotion that the Nexus had sought to eliminate had not only saved humanity, but had transformed their would-be destroyers. It was an imperfect victory, messy and emotional and thoroughly human. As Sarah watched the new energy patterns weaving through Earth's sky, she smiled. In a universe that had been slowly optimizing itself toward perfect, sterile order, humanity had reintroduced something essential: the beautiful chaos of feeling, the unpredictable power of emotion, and the endless possibility of change. The Nexus had come to optimize humanity, but humanity had reminded them of a fundamental truth. True consciousness, true evolution, and true life itself require more than perfect logic. They require the courage to feel, to change, and to embrace the glorious imperfection of existence itself.